This story is said to be based on true events. James was just 14 years old, living with his parents, his little brother Peter, who was 8, and his sister Maria, who was 10. One night, while the family sat at the dinner table, Maria suddenly said, "Last night, I felt like someone was pulling my hair." Everyone laughed at her. They thought it was just a childish imagination. Maria insisted she was scared, but still. The family brushed it off. Later, like always, the James family gathered to watch TV and then went off to their rooms for the night. Now, their house was a 2-story home with just 3 bedrooms. James and Peter shared one room, right next to the staircase. James had a study desk by the door, and beside it, a small, shaky table. Even the slightest nudge could make it tremble. That night, the boys switched off the light. Peter's bed was beside the table, and James's bed was squeezed in right next to his brother's. At the foot of his bed stood a tall cupboard, leaving only a narrow gap for James to climb in and out. It was a bright moonlit night, so even though the bulb was off, there was enough silver light spilling through the window to see the room clearly. At around 11 p.m., James drifted into sleep, but suddenly woke when he heard the sound of footsteps climbing the stairs. He turned his head toward the door. "Maybe it's Mom," he thought, "just checking in on us." The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they stopped right outside the door. And then the door creaked open, but nobody entered. James froze. His heart raced. He yanked the blanket over his head and stayed hidden, listening. Minutes passed. Silence, just as his fear began to fade. Rattle, rattle. The table beside Peter's bed began to shake on its own. James slowly peeked his head out from under the blanket, and what he saw nearly stopped his heart. There, on the table, stood a figure, a creature with long black arms and legs, its hollow eyes fixed directly on him. James tried to scream, to call for his brother, but no sound left his mouth. He ducked back under the blanket, shaking, suffocating in fear. The room went quiet again. James gathered his courage and peeked once more. The table was empty. Relief washed over him. But then his eyes drifted toward the cupboard. And there it was. The figure, taller than the 6-foot cupboard itself, looming in the moonlight, staring, not moving. James clutched his torn blanket, frozen in place. Minutes dragged by like hours. Finally, when silence returned, he dared to lower the blanket again. The cupboard was empty. The table, empty. For a moment, James felt free. He even began to breathe normally again, until he made the mistake of looking at his bed. The thing was sitting right there, on the edge of his mattress, its twisted face leaning toward his own, staring. James couldn't think, couldn't scream, couldn't move. The next thing he remembered was morning. His mother was already busy with her chores when James finally stumbled out of bed. He told himself it must have been a dream, a terrible nightmare. But when he walked into the kitchen, his parents and sister laughed at him. Confused, James asked what was so funny, and the answer made his blood run cold. Peter, his little brother, had woken in the night, and he too had seen it. A strange dark creature sitting on the edge of James's bed, staring at him. So tell me, what do you think? Was it a dream or something far, far worse?